Welcome to the Ascend Growth AI podcast. Today's conversation is going to be especially meaningful because we're talking about people, culture, and leadership, and how the right systems can help organizations grow without losing what makes them human. Our guest is Oana Breen, a people leader and the director of people operations at Form. She is also building visibility as a fractional CHRO, people and culture leader. Oana specializes in the intersection of strategy and implementation, especially in high change environments like startups, growth stage companies, and mergers and acquisitions. Her culture can either become a company's superpower or its biggest risk. Welcome, Oana.
It's a pleasure talking to you.
For anyone meeting you for the first time, tell us about your work today and the journey that brought you here.
It's been quite a journey. I like to call it a roller coaster one. Today, I am a people leader with over 15 years experience in building what I consider to be great in the HR space, which has been reframed into the people function. And I like that reframing because it shows what matters in the HR world, which is the people. But it was a long journey. I started with working for big corporations in Romania, where I'm originally from. And I stumbled upon a project in HR in 2008 and I never left. So the first HR project was a huge project. Unilever Spain outsourced all their HR services towards Accenture Romania, and I led a team of 14 people. And I think that that's where I learned what good looks like in HR because they had very solid processes and work procedures and everything that had to do with systems, and everything was put in place in a way that was flawless. And it gave me an idea of what good HR actually is. And then I translated that experience into startups. So I started working for startups and I never left that world either. I've been helping companies in startup and growth stages to set up their people function, or historically I've joined companies either as a full-time employee or as a fractional person leading their HR function when they needed to build or rebuild structure or to revisit their processes in a growth stage. And that's what I love doing. And I think that that is where my strength is, in the combination of that strategy and strategic view over processes and what their HR processes are in that moment, with the implementation of what great looks like, with real conversations with real people, understanding who they are, where they are, assessing their culture, understanding where they want to take their culture, organizational culture, and getting them there.
So you walk in, meet them where they're at, do a lot of evaluation, find out where they're headed, and then help them set up all of the strategies to make that come to life.
Correct. And everything in between, which means like setting up like maybe performance processes or maybe employee engagement or assessing their employee retention and where they want to be with that, or understanding their recruitment processes and why they're not growing the way they want to grow. It's a multifold action that leads to that result. And a lot of it is in the background. But yeah, I usually have deep and real conversations to understand where they are, where they want to be, and then come with a proposal of what we can do in order to take everybody there.
That's amazing. You describe yourself as strongest at the intersection of strategy and operations. What does that look like in real life, in the day to day?
In my experience, when people reach a certain level, they're either strategic and then they have other people implementing things for them, working for them. They can do the strategy and they have others implementing it. Or they're great at implementing, but they lack that depth into the strategy. And what I feel I have developed working for so many startup companies, where you have to do it all because there is nobody else to do it. So I learned to have a seat at the table and sit with the C-suite to understand that strategic point of view and their vision and what they see and where they see the company going. So that allows me to do a strategic approach to HR as well. But then I also am able to go and sit and actually do the implementation of things. Like I don't need people to work in the implementation phase alongside. It's beautiful to have them, and some companies do, and they offer me resources, and that's amazing. But if they don't, I'm able to sit down and do it myself and actually sit with the people, listen to them, have conversations with people at absolutely all levels in the company, understand where everybody is, and then come with a clear plan of implementation.
So you're the center hub of all of their communication, probably uniting them on things that they don't normally talk about either.
Yes, and it's very interesting because I had the feeling when I stepped into this kind of approach, like fractional person, I had a feeling that being fractional, which is by default and by definition part-time, I had a feeling that they maybe wouldn't be as open to having those conversations with me because they don't have an in into me. But somehow I feel that it's actually more. They're more tuned into having those conversations with me because they don't perceive me as a classic HR person. And I heard so many times, you don't talk like an HR person. And I'm always tempted to ask, what does an HR person talk like? Or what do they look like? You don't look like an HR person. What do they look like? But over time, I learned to stop asking and to just take it as a compliment because it means that they feel that they can talk to me without feeling the possibility of repercussion, their words or whatever they bring to the table.
Which helps you get your job done.
Correct. And I think that as long as you offer them a safe space, it doesn't matter if it's a full-time or a fractional safe space. It's important that it's a safe space where they can come. And I learned to ask them, what is that one thing that bothers them? Because if it's too many things, they get lost into too many details and it's harder to channel them. But if they can bring one thing to the table that they would change, if they had a magic wand, it's how I ask that question. If you had a magic wand and you could make anything happen, what would you change? And you can see patterns. So if there is one thing that they have to focus on, and many people in the company focus on that one thing, that is a very clear red flag for me.
When companies say culture, they often mean different things. How do you define organizational culture in a way that leaders can actually act on?
I recently posted a thing on LinkedIn that went almost viral for the kind of audience I don't have. I personally defined it like this. I said, culture is not your perks, and culture is not your fun Fridays, and culture is not what you offer people on a value poster. Culture is the conversations that never happen or that happen. Culture is the kind of behavior that you willingly or not willingly correct or punish, and the biases that you don't know that you have and you never acknowledge. So to me, that is the culture, understanding where we stand from that perspective. And there are so many leaders that say, my door is always open, and then they're shocked that nobody enters the door. Or people who say, I'm senior, I don't want to go up for promotion. It's not worth the struggle. That should not happen in a healthy organizational culture. Or people who are trying to blame one another for mistakes. And instead of saying, next time I could, they say next time they should. So those are the clear signs that culture is somewhere shaking. To me, culture is an ever evolving thing. So people who say our culture is open, it cannot always be open. You add another person to the team and they're going to impact that culture positively or negatively. But in my 15 years experience, what I've noticed is that it always trickles down. So it's always the executive suite and it's always the leaders that guide the culture in the company, not just the company and where we're going, but also the culture and the way it trickles down. And if they're truly open with their own mistakes, they're truly authentic, they're truly straightforward, they're truly vulnerable, the people will feel the desire and the connection to those values that they impress on.
I agree with that 100%. And if you don't have that, then you have a lot of really good people that leave the company.
Correct. You create a segregation in the department. So if as a leader you are unwillingly celebrating the wrong behavior, the people who want and are avid believers in the good behavior, they will feel separated from whatever the company dictates. And it's sometimes not the company, sometimes it can be just a department manager. And I've had cases where the culture was completely different from one department to another, and especially in remote places where there's a lot of segregation already. And if there is no, let's say, a constant all hands meeting and a constant off-site meetings and constant like events that everybody in the company joins together, there's already a segregation. So then each department ends up having a subculture and they tend to identify with, even if they have like defined values in the company, they tend to identify with a different value. That's also part of a diagnosis that I have done for certain companies in the past, where they come and say, we don't even know what our culture is, because if you ask people in marketing, they think it's this. And if you ask people in product, they say it's completely different. So that's where you go in and you try to understand exactly what is that middle ground and where everybody wants to be or could be, or where we could lead people to be. And then you take the action, whether it's one-on-one coaching with managers, whether it's conversations about the way feedback is perceived in the team and why. Because there are times when people do their best to give feedback. It's just perceived in the way that's not helpful.
You've said you're an industry agnostic because people are people. What's the first thing you look for to understand a company's people challenges?
It is a very cliche thing, and every time I say it, people look at me like I'm stating the obvious, but it's listening. And I do have a framework that I work with, and I do have a set of questions that I ask regardless. But besides those questions, I do tailor my conversation with the people depending on what I notice in the conversation. And I try not to analyze too much during the conversation. So I try to take the notes and to take it all in and to ask with pure curiosity and not with judgment. And I think that that's where a lot of people like go into those conversations with the assumption that they're going to find something or that they're going to discover something. Or when a C-suite person comes and tells you, I have this issue, people don't come to talk to me, you assume something. When sometimes that assumption could be completely off. And it happened over time that I got to discoveries that were completely different than my assumption walking into the conversation. And I think that is the secret and the balance to go in with, okay, a set of questions that are consistent, but also to tailor the conversation to every person and to every personality in order to get the best out of it. To go into the conversation with as few assumptions as possible. We all make assumptions, whether we want to or not, but try to put them aside and to actually engage in the conversation and be present and to actually listen to what people have to say with no judgment in the moment. Like I try many times to not even intervene, like to just allow them to put it out there. And then I take all those conversations and I look for patterns. I look to see if the people that talked to me are in different departments and they tell me the same thing or they tell me different things. If five people that report to the same manager tell you the same thing, at some point you need to start going deeper into that department, for instance.
That's really good. Let's talk about M&A and integration. When two cultures collide, what are the top 2 to 3 risks leaders underestimate? And how do you mitigate those early?
Great question. I think that the first huge thing is lack of communication. When you do mergers and acquisition, I think that the biggest mistake that you can make is to under communicate. I would rather over communicate than under communicate because there is already a fear on both sides. And I feel that fear has to do with, okay, if there are two positions that are the same, who's going to leave and what's the criteria of selection? What are you going to do with us? What's going to happen? What are your long-term goals with our company? Are you just buying us in order to do a merger or are you buying us in order to just grow your company and sell further? What's your intention? And I feel that those questions come naturally. And I've worked with a lot of types of mergers and acquisitions, like the ones that kept their own brand separate and the ones that like were integrated into the new brand. I think that the biggest risk is that it's already segregated the culture and that gap only gets bigger instead of getting closer. And we're going back to under communicating versus over communicating. And I think that what lack of communication does, because then these people feel that only these people are being communicated to, but these people feel that these are being communicated to when actually nobody knows. And I think that those moments in particular are the moments when all hands meetings are very important and like making very clear the message, sending very clear the message that everybody's communicating the same thing consistently at the same time. And there are no conversations behind closed doors with one party or another. Like sometimes you have to understand, okay, everybody needs to be represented at some point in those conversations so that nobody has the feeling that things are happening behind their back. Because the biggest fear is a lack of control and knowledge in those moments. And what helps the culture become more cohesive instead of being more spread apart, is having those conversations with the leaders from both sides and understanding who we are and where we're going. And I go back to the same thing over and over again, and you'll see that I'm going to repeat this over and over again. It's all about communication and listening and understanding who we are, where we want to go, and then creating a plan to go there instead of just like, okay, we'll just like throw this bunch of things in the air and see what falls.
You mentioned that if you build HR systems well, you almost work yourself out of a job because the chaos stabilizes. What systems do you put in place first that create the biggest long-term stability?
I think that the one thing that is extremely important is to have very clear rules that are in writing and they're for everybody. And it has become a challenge when you're working with people in 20 different states or in various places that have different rules. I do have a rule. It's my own rule. My own rule is go with the hardest law on the employer. So if you give people more than they're expecting or the state requires, you cannot be wrong. If you give them less, you can be wrong. So I usually try to unify it where it's requested. For instance, there are states that require a certain amount of days off, right? Other states don't require it at all. I try to go for everybody in the company with the same amount of days off. Because at the end of the day, you're all working for the same company. And if you feel that you're not entitled to 5 days off just because you live in the wrong place, that doesn't create the right feeling of being integrated in that company culture. So, what I'm trying to do when I go in and put a system in place is to first understand who am I working with, what are their needs, what works best for the type of environment that they work in. Because you're not going to give the same kind of like flexible PTO to people who are working in an office all the time versus people who are always remote, or hourly versus salaried, or heavy hourly populations versus heavy salaried population. It creates a disconnect there. So you're trying to be as fair as you can with the data that you have, with the people that you have. So I'm a firm believer that a handbook is extremely important because that states what we see as good moving forward from that point on. So even if they didn't have one in the moment I walk in, I'm trying to like gather all the policies that they have because most companies have them. They just don't put them down into a one document. So that would be a first thing. Then what I'm trying to see and to understand is what kind of benefits they have, what kind of payroll systems they have, what kind of performance management they do, what kind of things they look at from a people perspective. And then to create rules that are the same consistently throughout the company. And once you have those rules in place and they are thoughtfully created and put out there, the amount of work that takes to maintain is not the same as it takes when you create them. And that's what I meant that you're almost working yourself out of a job because it's like, do you need a C-suite level person to maintain things that are already in place? And the answer is usually no. You just need a more junior person that is able and competent and can do those things on a day-to-day basis. And maybe you need someone as a consultant when you need some guidance on the strategy, and that can be quarterly or semi-annually or annually, depending on the type of company and the growth. And it also depends on how fast they grow, because if you're having a company that grows from 2,000 people to 5,000 people in a year, you're clearly not running out of work. I'm talking about very early stage startups that have like 25 people and that don't need a full-time senior person anymore once all those things are.
And it circles back around to what you originally said, which is that you like to come in, help create the strategy, get everything set up, and then almost work yourself into it, and then just having a junior person be able to run the day to day.
Yes, and I think that again, for some types of companies, that is a very natural progression of the work in terms of HR. Like they don't, if they hire well and they don't have people problems and they don't have employee relation issues and they don't have engagement issues, and if we do all things right, where we set them on the right track, the train just goes on the track. And if it derails at some point, you know who to call, and we sit down at the table again, and it's a one-off solution rather than a permanent interaction with the system, because the system's already in place.
Who's your ideal customer for your fractional CHRO?
I think the ideal customers are exactly the companies I mentioned, very early startups that want to set up well to begin with. Because I think that once they reach a 100 people mark is when people start thinking about hiring HR. Like that's the point when it gets out of control. Like it's too many people to even remember everybody's name. You don't know anymore who's where, what. And that's the point when a lot of companies think about getting a full-time HR person. I personally believe that HR should be the first hire. I might be biased, but even if it's in a fractional capacity, it makes a huge difference. And I talk from experiencing this role in a very, very, very early stages startups. It makes a huge difference when you sit down before your first hire with someone and you think of a strategy with people in mind, with thinking, what kind of people do I need in the company in order to take me there? What kind of qualities am I looking for in a person? And every time I ended up hiring for those very early stage startups, one of my questions, and I'm giving you my biggest secret, one of my questions is, are you a path follower or a path creator? And we're all a bit of both, and we can all be both. But there are people who are naturally creators and people who are naturally followers. And in this world, both are extremely needed. But if you're in a very, very early stage startup and you're a follower, you're going to be very frustrated because there's nothing in place. The person hiring you is going to be very frustrated because you need handholding and nobody has the time and the availability to do that. So I think that those are conversations that a very first seed startup doesn't usually think of. They just find a great fit for the role. This person has a lot of experience and yeah, sure, let's hire them. But then if they don't have the structure in place, it's not a good hire, even if they have the experience, it's a great hire otherwise. So I think that that's why they need somebody who has been in the people function and understands those things from a different perspective than just the pure, okay, this is what we're driving in the company and we need somebody to sell. Come in and sell. Well, how will you set up that strategy? If the person is not a strategic thinker and has not worked in startups before or does not have the mindset, because I have not started in startups. And I never understood why corporate world frustrated me until I started working in startups. And I realized that I'm not the kind of person to wait for 7 signatures before I do something. I just want to be able to go and do it. And if you find the right people and you empower them to do it, they will take the company where you want it to go. So that's why, to answer your question, going back, I took a huge detour to answer. I think that my ideal customers are the people that either want to set up HR well from the start, from the get-go, and they're in very early stage startups, but they need some guidance into what kind of people they need, what kind of processes they need with those people, what kind of systems they need in order to make their lives easier, what kind of operations they need to run when it comes to people in order to have it set up from the get-go, or when they are in a growth stage and they realize that things are okay, we cannot continue doing things the way we were doing them because there is no structure, nobody knows exactly what to do, we're growing beyond a point where we know who everybody is and what everybody is doing, and we're losing control and oversight on what people are doing and what the role is, and they don't even know.
What geographic area do you cover and what languages do you speak?
I speak a lot of them. My mother tongue is Romanian, so I speak Romanian, and I learned English and Spanish at a very early age, and also French. So those are my fluent languages. And
Wow.
besides those, I like to play with languages. So I speak a bit of Italian, a bit of Portuguese, and some Danish because I did my master's degree in organizational culture in Denmark.
Got a lot in that arsenal.
Yeah, I prefer not to work in the languages I only know how to ask for food in. But other than that, Romanian, English, French, and Spanish are are languages that I can completely have business conversations in, and I have in the past. I noticed that, again, historically, I have been approached by people who are maybe US based but want to expand to Europe or Latin America, and they would like somebody who understands both cultures and languages. But I've also worked, and it's actually how I got to the US. I worked for a European company who was expanding to the US. So I've worked in 5 different countries, in 4 different states, and in a multitude of industries and companies.
Very good. When we're experiencing economic pressure, layoffs, budget cuts, what are the most effective ways you've seen leaders protect culture while still staying financially responsible?
As I've said before, culture is not perks and it's not the things that you offer people. All those things that you offer people without the safety and the psychological safety and the communication don't do anything else but build resentment. So I don't believe that financial stability is something that you can hide from people. Like, we're not blind. Nobody's blind. Like, we all see the news. We all understand that money's tight everywhere for everyone. So I'm going back to communication and to creating safety, to being very clear with your goal and purpose. Like, look, we are in a very tight moment financially. This is what we're working on. We're working on finding financing from here and here. We're expecting it to hit by this date. If it doesn't, we will all be impacted, and we will communicate at a later stage what that means for everybody. Like, as long as you're authentic and truthful and open and you communicate clearly, nobody can hold that against you. They hold it against you, and it creates resentment when they feel that there's more to it that you're not saying, that you already have a list of who's going and you're just keeping it there to use it against them. And those are very, very subtle things that a lot of leaders don't perceive in their own communication. And that's where they need some guidance sometimes. And I honestly don't like when HR is seen as just like the bad guys who are doing things to terminate people. I have terminated so many people, and it's always taxing for me. So I'm never the bad guy who just does that and then goes home and laughs I'm not a Grinch. I tried to do it with empathy and honestly almost cried in those conversations myself. I was terminating people that broke my heart because I knew they were in a very tight personal situation and I knew that it would impact their life and well being. And you still have no choice. But even those people thanked me at the end of the conversation because it's about the way you communicate the things and it's about the way you put yourself out there to be their support system and to help them navigate that emotion rather than just cold cut doing something with no empathy and no communication.
How do you feel that you work best, as an individual or with a group of people?
Interesting question because I feel both are equally good for me. I have had the largest team that I've had was 14 people. And from there, I've had teams of 1, teams of 5, teams of like, and I was also a team of 1 for various companies. So I think I can do both. My preference is to work with people. That's why I chose a people function. I love working and collaborating with them because I feel that the ideas flow differently. But if I have to do it as a team of 1, I can tune in and focus and do it as a team of 1.
I think collaboration is good too, but I suppose some companies, when they're starting out, don't have the budget for more than one. So you almost have to start off individual, and then the company people are your collaboration. And then as it grows, you grow your team too.
Exactly that. That's what I wanted to say. When you don't have a team you created and you created with people around you, and as long as you see the whole company as a team, it works magic.
That's awesome. How are you currently using AI in your work today, even lightly? And where do you see the biggest opportunity for AI to support people ops without replacing the human factor?
It's interesting that you brought this question right after the previous one because I think that I make AI my team at times because I have many ideas and it's very easy for me to just like pile them up somewhere and just like have that completely unemotional factor sift through those ideas. But for as long as the people function works with people, I think that you need that empathy and that one on one communication And that's where we're going back to communication, to listening, to trust, to honest feedback. And while I totally trust AI in giving me personally feedback on how I write, how I express things, on communication, emails, and it helps again cut through the noise and get to the core of things, I think it lacks that true human, true understanding the emotion in something. And I notice that it also tends to cut it from communication. And I think that that's where you can create a disconnect if you're just basing it on AI and you exclude completely the human component. AI is happening, whether you accept it or not. It's something that is there. You can either use it to help you or you can be against it and push it away and then wonder what's happening. And there are people who make things happen and people who wonder what happened. And I want to be one of those who make things happen. So I'm going to adopt it as well as I can and make it my team.
Maybe it can help give you ideas for how you structure companies too, right? Put in
Correct.
your prompt and on all the information you have on each individual and how they think, and then let it help you.
Correct. I think that where it lacks, it can definitely help, but it helps if you give it the right prompt. So you still need that human analysis and the capability of understanding where the company wants to grow and what they want to do and where they want to be in order to be able to prompt the AI to give you a good structure. Because I've noticed that if you don't, it just gives you like a blank statement that has no value. Like it only has value when you allow it to learn from your ongoing communication and from what you're trying to do and who you're trying to be. And then once it has all the data and you are able to actually trust it with a confident prompt, then you can use the information in order to continue your train of thought.
If you could wave a wand, what do you wish you were using AI for right now?
For the capability of being everywhere at the same time. I think that that's where I'm trying to do it all and to be a full-time employee and to build a business on the side and to be a mother and to be a friend and to be a partner and to be everything. And I feel that that's where if you use a tool to optimize your time and to go through things that are irrelevant or to help you prioritize things or to help you with, I don't know, a to-do list. How would you structure my day if you had to do this, this, and this with priority? I think that that's where it can function as your personal assistant. And I think that that's where I would like to use it better, where it's my personal assistant and it actually helps me do everything that I want to do and be everywhere I want to be in it.
Actually, it's really gearing up to be able to do that even with a simple prompt now, which is good. We need some of those basic things to be handled simply.
Exactly.
What's working really well right now that you're proud of, either inside Form or in your own growth journey as a fractional leader?
I am very proud of my own growth. In general, my own growth, not just professional in any way. And I think that you die when you stop growing. And I'm very proud to say that I'm trying to learn something new every day and I'm trying to grow every day. And I feel that when you're in a remote team and when you're far away and when you're alone in your own bubble, sometimes it's easier to drift away from growth and from learning. And partly that's why I started this side journey of fractional HR positions because I wanted to be exposed to more companies, to more leaders, to more teams, to more things that force me to think and grow and put me in that growth mindset. Because I feel that once you lose it, it's easy to just go down the slope and to just become complacent and to just accept the status quo, which is not who I am. So one thing that I'm extremely proud of is the growth. And the other thing that I've had to navigate very, very uncertain times. And I'm very proud that I was able to do it with empathy and love. Because I think that, again, it's very easy to try to disconnect yourself from a situation that's not pleasant or it's not useful to you personally. But I feel that that's where the disconnect happens and the culture is broken when you cannot put yourself into other people's shoes and discuss absolutely everything with empathy and authenticity and build trust and help people in their growth journey as well.
Nice. Very good. What's one thing that's frustrating you right now?
Uncertainty at all levels, uncertainty when it comes to the financial market, uncertainty when it becomes to the stability of my customers, uncertainty when it becomes to my son's growth, to the world we're living in, to uncertainty in general is an anxiety producing factor. And when it's a lot of it and it comes from everywhere, it's a bit puzzling.
If you could go back and talk to the version of you starting again, what would you tell your younger self to do differently, especially around career strategy, visibility, and choosing the right opportunities?
A lot. I would tell my young self a lot. And the first thing I would tell my young self is to not be scared to try things while she's young. So there was a lot of fear around stability. And revolution happened when I was a kid, and then everything shifted and changed, and nobody knew what was coming and what democracy was. And it was years and years and years of transformation. But I come from a generation that was still raised with fear of speaking, fear of change, fear of doing things differently just because you need to belong and you need to not stand out. Because if you do, God knows what will happen. And oops, you cannot even say the word God. So I come from a place that was very rooted into fear. And once you have the stability of a job, of a place, of a something, you do not make changes. And that's, again, not who I am. But that made me start in corporate very early. Like I started my first job when I was 18 in one of the biggest telecom companies in Europe. So once I got the job, I was in the job for 6 years without trying anything new, without trying to grow, without trying to go anywhere else. I missed the opportunity of a scholarship abroad, of studying abroad. And I took that and took responsibility for my own growth when I was already in my 30s, when I decided to leave everything and go back to school and do a master's in my passion, organizational culture and leadership in a completely foreign country, Denmark, where I did not speak the language, another new thing. And I only got the courage to do that when I was in my 30s, because all the way from when I started my first job until then, I just went with, okay, you have to sit here and to do what's right, but without ever challenging what is right for me. So if I were to look back at me and other people at the beginning of their careers, would be to sit for a moment and ask yourself, what is you and what is what you borrowed from others and doesn't suit you anymore? Because otherwise it's like trying to fit in a t-shirt that you bought when you were 3 years old, and you won't fit and it will frustrate you. And it's a t-shirt you love, but it's still not useful to you today. So I'd rather put that in a memory box and go shopping and buy the right t-shirt. And it's a silly parallel, but I think that it's a metaphor that suits younger me.
For listeners who want to be a CEO or senior leader someday, what are 2 or 3 leadership habits that you've noticed in some of your clients that matter most?
It's a good one. One of them is that growth mindset I was talking about. And I think that's a very interesting one, because there are many leaders who think that once they get there, they don't need to grow and they know better. When most of the times the people that are doing the work and are in contact with customers have a lot of insight that they start up there lacking if they stay in the bubble. So I think that keeping their feet on the ground, talking to their people every day and accepting the fact that they can grow even from people that report to them and learn from them, I think that that's one of the biggest things that I've noticed makes a huge difference. The other thing that I've noticed makes a huge difference is when they ask, maybe not for feedback, but for advice constantly. And that also gives them different perspective, because when a leader comes and asks for feedback, people are reluctant in giving it because they fear repercussions. But when you come as a leader and ask for advice from your people, that makes people open up and bring it to you. And I think that that also builds the trust. It's like, oh, he wants my opinion or she wants my opinion. And then also it allows them to have insight in a different shape that is more useful and less fearful, where people open up better. And the other thing that I would say is to be very clear about your why and to be able to communicate it. Most companies that I've seen either disconnected or failing or where they go down the slope is when either the leaders don't know the why and are not connected to the why anymore, or they're not able to push that why to the people. And I've seen a lot of companies where people are able to talk about the product and are able to talk about what they're doing, but they're not able to talk about why they're doing what they're doing and why that product even exists. What is our why? Why are we here? Are we just another company? Or do we want to actually address something or someone? And if the problem that you're trying to address is not clear, it's all just noise. Like it should be obvious from what you're doing and who you are, from the passion you're talking about your product or your company. It should be very clear what your why is. And I think that these are the three things that make a huge difference between great leaders and leaders.
What's the biggest win that stands out in your mind over the last 5 to 10 years?
On a personal level, is being a single mom and actually doing a good job. And I cannot separate my personal life from who I am professionally, because I feel that my son is one of the biggest and best leaders I've ever had in life. He's taught me more than any job has, about resilience, about communication, about feedback, about advice versus feedback, about so many things that you never think about when you become a parent and you think you are raising a child. No, children raise us just as much. So I think that that's one of the biggest accomplishments that I have in life. And the other one professionally is the fact that I spent many years thinking that what I have to say is not relevant because it was said before. And if you look at it from a human perspective, probably everything that I could say has probably been said before. So I'm not wrong about that. But it might still resonate with someone. The way I say, the way I frame it, the way I gather all that has been said and put it into my own experience and through my own framework. And I'm very proud of the fact that I allowed myself to let this voice out and to accept the fact that what I have to say, even though it's the same, it's said with a passion that probably nobody else has, with a mindset that not many people have, with an experience that not many people have, with a passion for organizational culture, for a passion for people. And these are things that maybe touch someone differently than anything else that's been said before. And I'm very proud that I allowed myself to get out there and to speak and to allow my voice to be heard.
That's really great. Given that you're used to solving problems of multiple magnitudes and a lot of them all at one time, what is something that you are focused on right now?
Going over this Christmas, wondering what the elf on the shelf is going to do next. But all jokes aside, there are many things that I'm juggling right now. Part of them have to do with getting out there and trying to grow my business. But I want to do it in a way that also aligns with my life, that also aligns with me being able to be a mother, not allowing myself to give more time than I can give just to build something that I feel resentful for later on. And for me, that was a wake up moment when my 8-year-old told me, Mom, you always work. Because I feel that working from home nowadays makes it very easy for me to never disconnect. And because it's always about customers and people and always about full time jobs and people issues and payroll and taxes and things that are definitely important from all possible perspectives, it's very easy for me to not be able to say no. I think that one of the biggest issues I'm trying to solve now is to be able to create or to force on myself a work life balance in a true sense.
Very good. So, and I think that a lot of people strive to do that their whole lives, or they don't focus on that their whole lives. They go either way.
Correct. But I feel that life has a way to teach you the lessons that you need to learn, and it teaches you the hard way. And that's a moment of vulnerability for me now. In my personal case, it was with ending up in the hospital because I pushed an infection so much that it became sepsis. And I ended up in the hospital. And driving to the hospital, I was wondering, did I allow that? Why do I allow myself to never take a moment where I fully disconnect and where I fully rest? And that was a cultural shock when I came from Europe to the US, because in Europe, people do take that time off and there is no work from home. At least when I left, there was none. And even when there was, it was like so clear that there had to be a moment of disconnect for like 21 days. I came here and it was like, oh, there's no paid time off that's legally required. We might give it to you or we might not. And that's why I became an advocate for it so much in companies. And I really think that people should take time off because that is the key to being productive afterward.
You have been a joy to talk to today. You have so much wisdom and insight, and you've taken things that you've learned all across the years in different formats. And now I wish you every ounce of luck as you go out to venture to do it on your own and for multiple people and becoming a name that people seek to be able to come in and help them get started because they know they're going to get started in a quality way.
I really hope that you are right in this one. And I would say amen to that, every word that I said. And I'm really had a hard time getting my voice out there. But I hope that once it is out there, it helps people because at the end of the day, that's why I chose the career that I chose because I want to help people. And by people, I mean people, organizations, and everybody. I believe in true win-wins.
It's been such a powerful conversation because you're showing what so many leaders need to hear right now. That culture isn't fluff. HR isn't the villain, and real growth happens when strategy implementation actually meet real world with real people. I think you're a very real and a very genuine person, and you're going to find huge success.
Thank you so much. It was quite a pleasure talking to you from the very beginning of this, completely connected to you. And I'm very grateful that you found me and that you accepted to have this conversation.
Thank you. You're very welcome, and thank you.